oh yeah, everything's in stereo to like, boom, vocals are here, guitars are here, drums are here. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's crazy what feet can do.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not usually a feet guy, but with these feet,
Right.
I like these feet. Is there an OnlyFans channel for these feet? I like these feet.
Right.
Podcast.
Welcome to the eCoustics podcast. This is Brian Mitchell, your host and founder of eCoustics.com. Today, we're discussing the best things we saw and heard at what's being called the largest home theater show in the world, and that would be Audio Advice Live, which was just held August 1st through 3rd in Raleigh, North Carolina. And back from the event, after many miles of travel, we are joined by eCoustics editor-at-large, Chris Boylan. Hey, Chris.
Hey, how's it going, Brian? Good to see you.
And Acoustics video producer, Ealan Osborne. Hey, Ealan.
Hello, Brian and Chris.
Good to see you both. But before we jump into our best in show picks, I wanted to understand a little bit more about the event and how it became the largest home theater show in the world. And to make things a little bit spicy, did it steal the crown from CEDIA Expo?
Oh,
Chris.
is that for me?
Chris, what do you think?
So it's funny you mentioned that because when Scott Newnham, the CEO of Audio Advice, the store that actually hosted this wonderful event, said, "We're the biggest home theater show." I'm like, really? Bigger than CEDIA? But he did point out the fact that Audio Advice Live is open to consumers, which CEDIA and CES are not. So their whole show is to try to bring consumers in to get them excited. And I think they brought in, I don't know, I don't want to say the full number because we don't have final numbers yet, but there were certainly hundreds, if not thousands of people at the show, crowding the elevators, crowding all the demos. It was still manageable, I would definitely say. I don't think we had to wait around as long as we sometimes do for demos at things that even CEDIA and CES. But it was just generally a very upbeat, kind of enthusiastic crowd. And as my first attendance at Audio Advice Live, I was very impressed. How did you feel, Ealan? Your first impression as well.
Yeah, I mean, it just seems like the fact that the owner and everybody working underneath him is just, I don't know, they're very down to earth people. They're very accommodating. They're very friendly. I mean, obviously they're there for a job and they want people to be there so they can sell some things and get a lot of enthusiasm around home theater and two-channel hi-fi, whatever. So they're doing their job, but at the same time, they do it very well. And I don't know, it felt more homey. Is that if that's the way you can say it? Like, I don't know, like it just felt like some friends inviting you to a party as opposed to like corporate, big wigs or people in suits saying, "Look at our stuff and make your purchases, please." So it just kind of had a little bit more lax feel to it, as if it was, buddies wanting you to join in on the fun.
So can you give us a little bit of the layout? How are these rooms set up and how is it different than maybe other shows you've been to? Chris?
Okay. So it was a smaller space in general than, you'd get at a huge expo hall, like, a CEDIA, but it was probably more akin to, a Capital Audio Fest or one of the smaller to medium sized, I would say, two-channel hi-fi shows. They did have quite a few of the larger, like home theater type displays on the first, second, and third floors in the kind of convention area of the hotel. It was the Sheraton in Raleigh. So these were like meeting rooms, anywhere from, 20 by 20 to like 40 by 40 in size. And, they'd undergone some pretty radical transformations for the event. They didn't put in home theater chairs, sadly. We did see an awesome home theater chair, but we were sitting on those, standard uncomfortable hard seats, but probably better to get the imaging and hear the sound, and certainly a lot easier to get in and out of when you're, shepherding in new audiences every 15 minutes. So the larger ones were on those three kind of meeting room floors. And then there were 3 floors in the residential area of the hotel 14th through 16th floor, I think, where they had the smaller displays. But I did see one, like the Macintosh Sonus Faber home theater was in one of the regular sized hotel rooms, and they crammed like $210,000 worth of speakers and electronics into this little room, and it sounded amazing. But for the most part, they're, large rooms, large systems, upwards of $250,000, awesome projectors, awesome screens, awesome speakers. And, so the layout was like that. Again, bunch on the ground floor and second and third floor, and then a few more upstairs.
So I think we're talking about some of the very best home theater equipment you can buy right now. Audio Advice is also a retailer. They sell pretty much everything that was demonstrated at the show on their website. Is that my understanding? And Ealan, did you feel like you got to see all the rooms you wanted to see and demo all the equipment? How'd you?
Yeah, I personally just wanted to focus on surround sound as much as I could. The only, I mean, we can talk about this in more detail later, but the only 2-channel hi-fi system I really spent some time on was the IsoAcoustics room, just because Jacqueline, who is kind of in charge and their PR person, got me an exclusive like after hours demo of the new IsoAcoustics Gaia little isolation feet.
Yep.
So I not only got like a breakdown of those new feet, but also got to sit down because this was the first time I actually had my new binaural earbud microphones with me. So I would just try and plop down in the very center of whatever demo room I was in, put those binaural microphones on, and then just try and capture like an actual binaural, audio experience, which I am now trying to put on my own YouTube channel. But even that, it's kind of difficult because it's a lot of licensed content. So I don't actually make a dime on those videos, but it's there for anybody who would like to at least somewhat experience what it may have sounded like, because obviously they're not like professional binaural microphones or, one of those like dummy head, like mannequin heads where it's got like actual like binaural, acoustics going on. But for the most part, I mean, like as I'm listening to them and editing them, it sounds pretty cool. It really captures like, especially the surround effects. So I was really excited that I actually got to debut and check out and see what those binaural microphones could actually do. And I was impressed. So that was mainly my thing though. I wanted to get the surround sound stuff mostly, and I pretty much hit all of them, I believe. But 2-channel hi-fi, I didn't really hit on all that much.
Well,
it's really, I'm sorry. I was just going to say, it's really tough to capture a live demo. And that's why I encourage anybody on the East Coast, West Coast, wherever you are, if you can get to a show like this, it's so much better in person than trying to capture. I mean, I'm sure your recordings are going to approximate what the surround sound, really kind of sounded like, but it's hard to get them, to really capture what it's like to be there live. I did my own little thing with a stereo, Shure microphone as well to capture some of the demos, and you can get decent results, but speakers, just like live performances, they sound so much different in person. So it's almost a lost cause. We keep trying, and hopefully we'll get better and better at being able to capture these things, because some people just can't make it, right? I mean, it's just not feasible for them to travel to Raleigh or to Denver or to Las Vegas for these shows, or they might not be able to get in, right, to the non-consumer shows. So we do what we can, but we have to just kind of use our words to describe, how they sounded to us. And that's about the best we can do in many circumstances. But I think trying to provide a little sample of it is worthwhile. Is it going to be perfect? No, but let's try.
Right. And I think Ealan did bring up one of our Best in Show winners, which is the IsoAcoustics Gaia Neo Series isolation feet. And I'm very curious on that, on your demo, like I've heard other IsoAcoustics products and they do make a difference. Were you able to capture that in your video recordings, Ealan, or?
I assume so. I haven't yet edited that specific video, but that's actually, I'm almost there with all the other content that I was able to get throughout the show. But judging by the results of what I have been able to get with the other stuff I've already edited, I'm assuming that it was able to capture. I mean, it's just crazy. Like, well, here's a funny story though. As I'm walking in, because it's, they're supposed to close down at 5:00. So I walked in about 4:57, and there's nobody in the IsoAcoustics room except the two gentlemen there who are always supposed to be there. So I'm getting my equipment out, and then this old guy, this old codger, just comes waltzing in.
How do you know he's a codger?
He had a shirt, it said it on.
I'm a codger. All right.
And but I mean, this guy in his 70s or something walks in, sits down, and he's like, look, I came in here because so-and-so told me I have to come in here because I'm not going to believe the results of your silly acoustic feat. So I need you to prove me wrong. Yeah. And it was actually really cool. I should have recorded the entire conversation because, I mean, those two guys that were in the room, they went into extreme detail on the science behind what their feet are actually providing to your tower speakers, way more than what the actual demo that I got was after the fact that I was able to video. So I'm kind of kicking myself that I didn't get that conversation, documented, because I mean, they even gave, because they have this little clicker where you can go between regular and then IsoAcoustics speakers. So they even gave this guy the clicker, so he had control. And you could see him really, really dialing in and really trying to hear the difference. And by the end he was sold. So whatever it does it well. Because and again, I'm hoping I captured this with my binaural microphones, but the vocals especially, I would highly recommend, if you listen to a lot of music with vocals, if you listen to instrumental music, yes, it makes a difference, but you can really tell the difference when you're listening to somebody singing. Because when you don't have IsoAcoustics feet, the vocal presence is kind of this wide image of the vocals. But as soon as he switched it over to the IsoAcoustics feet, with the vocals just snapped right down the center. There was no guesswork in where the vocals were coming from, because it was just plain as day. You could hear them right down the center. So it just makes everything kind of, everything's in stereo to boom, vocals are here, guitars are here, drums are here. I don't know. Yeah, it's crazy.
I think I have the same feeling. Yeah. I'm not usually a feet guy, but with these feet, I like these feet. Is there an OnlyFans channel for these feet? I like these feet. I've seen a lot of snake oil, and I write about snake oil sometimes. And usually, when I mention the word snake oil, I never hear from that manufacturer ever again. It happened recently. But this is not snake oil. These are isolating feet that help to basically isolate the speaker or the equipment component from vibrations, and they have a positive impact on the sound. So I don't think we should spend the whole episode on the feet, but these are good feet, and they don't cost thousands of dollars. They're a couple $100 depending on which model you get. It's a nice little upgrade for most speakers, and you can keep them when you sell your speakers and buy a new pair. You put them on the new ones. So yes, yay, IsoAcoustics, one of the best in show, but I'm sure we have a lot more.
We do have a lot to cover, so we're going to have to speed it up a little bit, because we have 16 more products that we want to get to, or award-winning systems and products. And let's start in the soundbar category. Okay. The best soundbar system went to the Harman Kardon Enchant 1100. And Chris, what can you tell us about that one?
Well, I hadn't heard much from Harman Kardon recently. I still have an old Harman Kardon receiver up in my loft here in the cabin, still working from the 80s. And it's nice to see that brand make a little bit of a comeback here. I know they did introduce Enchant soundbars a few years ago, and it didn't seem like very much happened then. But I think they're incorporating it into their Harman Kardon One mobile app, so you can do whole home systems. They've got a new Enchant speaker that you can use in the rear that has not just front firing, but upward firing drivers as well. So if you use them in as part of this Enchant system, you've got a soundbar with 11 drivers in the front. You've got a powered subwoofer, of course. You always need one of those, and a couple of these Enchant speakers in the back. And it gives you a really close approximation of 7.1.4. Yes, it uses some reflectivity. It uses their beamforming kind of technology that allows you to spread the sound around the room. But it did a good job, and it was like maybe $2,200 for the full system, including the largest soundbar, the powered subwoofer, and the rear speakers. And I think it sounded great. Looking forward to hearing them in a little more detail. I think they're coming out in the fall.
Yeah, very competitive soundbar category. This is one of the most affordable soundbars at the event.
Well, at the event, for sure, yeah.
Yeah. And Ealan, any quick thoughts on this soundbar?
I just thought it was impressive that it's yet another competitor to Sonos, just because everything can be independent on its own. You don't have to get the soundbar with the subwoofer and the surrounds. You can get just the soundbar. You can get it with the surrounds, and the surrounds are actually a lot larger than I anticipated. I mean, again, yeah, they're definitely competing with the size of Sonos Era 300s, that kind of thing.
Exactly.
But yeah, I was really impressed that it can be modular like that, and you're not having to get an entire system or nothing.
Right.
So,
yeah.
Just
and one thing I like
is great.
Yeah, options are always good. One thing I liked was that it did have a second HDMI port. I know it's a minor thing, but both Sonos and the Bose top-of-the-line soundbars don't have a second HDMI input, which means if your TV doesn't happen to pass through all of the audio formats, like DTS:X, for example, then it's not an option for you. So by having a second HDMI direct input, you can plug in a gaming console or a Kaleidoscope or a Blu-ray player and get the audio directly to the bar and then pass the video to the TV. So it's a nice little option. It helps, not worry about compatibility issues in your TV.
Right.
Cool. And stepping up, there's a more luxury soundbar, you might say, a one-piece, all-in-one, no rear speakers, at least right now. And that goes to the KEF, I'm going to say XIO, but I know there's other pronunciations for the soundbar. But this is KEF's first ever soundbar, and it seems like they hit it out of the park. It's a $2,500 soundbar, but what are they doing with one box solution? Chris?
Well, it's a little sneaky. They didn't play it for us with just a single box, right? Even in its like simplest form, they did have a little cube subwoofer. It's a KC62, I think it is, a little like maybe 10-inch cubed subwoofer that they used for the bass. They tell us that it only kicks in the lowest octave, so like below 40 hertz. So if the soundbar on its own can get down to 40 hertz, that's really impressive for a soundbar. But what impressed me more was that they put on piano work. Usually soundbar people don't demo piano because it's so hard to reproduce properly. And it got both the size and the character of the sound, like nailed it. It felt like there was a baby grand in front of me when they were playing back this piano recording. Now, it also sounded good on movie clips. It sounded good on, techno and more dynamic music that had a lot of low bass. But what I ignored about this soundbar when it came out is like, it doesn't have rear speakers. It still doesn't have rear speakers, but they are saying that is something they're planning to bring to market later this year. So will it work with the LST2s or whatever they're called, the existing KEF wireless speakers, or will it need a new kind of wireless speaker for the rear? I'm not sure, but that was the one thing missing. I mean, it did a convincing job of immersion with, again, side reflective and upward firing drivers. I think it would be even better with a nice pair of rear speakers added on.
But I think when you add the subwoofer, though, it bumps the price up to over $4,000. I'm guessing
that one little subwoofer was $1,600. So yeah, so $2,500 plus $1,699, it is about $4,200. It's a lot for a soundbar system, but it doesn't mean you have to use that soundbar. So when they used, it's Kev. Of course, they're going to show you a Kev. You can mix and match. You can put really
you mean
any
subwoofer.
soundbar.
You meant subwoofer.
Did I say? I'm sorry. I meant subwoofer. Yes, it has a wired subwoofer output you can use with any subwoofer. If you're going to keep it within brand, then you're going to be a little more limited in that you'll have to match it with a Kev, and that's, I think, the only way you can do it wireless. But if you go wired, you could, you have some other options for soundbars.
Any thoughts, Ealan, on this soundbar?
I just think it's nice that there's another competitor to the Sennheiser Ambio Max. Because again, the Sennheiser Ambio also has a subwoofer output, so you can use any subwoofer you want. But I do enjoy the fact that eventually Kev has stated that they will be supporting some sort of rear surrounds at some point, which I think is going to be what tips it in its favor compared to the Ambio. Because I don't know, that's just like, I guess it's German confidence with Sennheiser or something. Like, no, you don't need surrounds. The soundbar does all of it. You don't need surrounds. Like, I don't get that. Like, you need surrounds to actually have surround experiences.
Yes.
So
now dance.
Right. The fact that Sennheiser just says you don't need it whatsoever, that's pushing it. So I'm hoping that Kev follows through with some actual surrounds.
Yeah, and I mean, more power to them. I think their consumer is not necessarily us, right? I mean, the people who are buying a soundbar and it's their only choice, it's the only thing they're considering, probably aren't as interested in putting a pair of speakers in the back of the room because they want something sleek that improves the sound of the TV or projector and is easy to install and looks good, right? So these lifestyle type brands and products, which I think the Zio really is a lifestyle oriented product, is oriented toward these people that don't want to put anything in the back. So yeah, make the audiophiles happy, make the people who want the real surround sound happy. But if they can provide a one-piece solution that really sounds amazing, then they've got a pretty good audience for that.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's switch it over now that we covered the soundbars into best 2-channel hi-fi. And we're starting out with somewhat of a entry level, although I wouldn't call it entry level because it's still on the relatively expensive side. But we have NAD and DALI for best 2-channel streaming. And we're stepping up. I know I think we're over 10,000 for this system.
Yeah, I think so. Well, definitely, because the Rubicore speakers alone were like 12. I don't know. They're up there, 12,000 a pair. I did not go to every stereo room, and I think, as Ealan said, he didn't go into every stereo room. So I can't definitively say this was the absolute best sounding 2-channel at the show, but it was a nice
affordable, accessible 2-channel. That's what we were going for, because
20-ish thousand affordable. I don't know. It's a little up there for affordable.
Well, when we talk about some of your next winners, the prices start to
it goes
go
up from there. Yeah. What I liked
up.
about this is that it was simple. It was a pair of speakers and a powered amplifier streamer, a network streamer with built-in amplification. It had the Blue OS operating system, which users seem to love. They haven't pulled a Sonos yet, and delivered a whole new version of the app that people didn't think was as good as the previous version. Let's put it that way. So they've got a lot going for them, a lot of momentum. It's a nice platform. It sounded amazing. These speakers are handmade in Denmark by little old ladies winding speaker coils on a magnet. It really happens. Winding coils, exactly. So it was a great sounding system. It was very elegant looking. It's probably just one step away from the wireless speaker, lifestyle integrated speaker system. So I liked what I heard. Not sure if Ealan, if you got to hear that one and all the DALI.
I did not get to hear that one.
DALI and NAD, I should say.
Yep. And now we have best retro looking sound system. This is a fun category, very popular. People want the vintage look. And for this went to Onkyo and Klipsch. Taking it retro, what were the models and how was that set up, Chris?
Don't have the model numbers of the Onkyo amps in my head. But they had two systems on display. They had an integrated amp, and that was driving a pair of the Forte 4s. I think they are the latest version of the Klipsch Forte. But the system that I liked a little better was the La Scalas, which are those big horn speakers that are like huge and like super efficient. You could drive them with like a 3-watt per channel triout tube amp, but they didn't. They drove them with 3 stereo power amps in a tri-amped configuration. And these were Onkyo amps, power amps, I think about 2,000 each, that had the nice bouncing orange VU meters. So you could see exactly what power is going to which driver. Each driver on the speakers had its own dedicated mono power amp. So the amps look cool in retro, the speakers look cool in retro, and they sounded amazing. So what else could you want? Well, you could want something that's less than $15,000, I guess.
Something like that.
Yeah. So yeah, there was not a lot of value-based systems, like inexpensive budget systems that I saw at the show. Although there probably were some in rooms that I didn't make it into. But that's something that's kind of par for these big shows, the hi-fi shows, is that everybody wants to show like, blah, this is the best that we can do. This is our state of the art. And that, the price tags end up going up for that.
And speaking of the best we can do, Focal was there with their best wireless speaker ever. The Focal Diva Mezza Utopia. Probably the most expensive wireless speaker on the market. I can't think of one more expensive. $70,000 a pair, but it's everything all in one. Your amp, your streamer, you plug them in and you play music, and that's your system. No cables, none of the other stuff. How did those sound, Chris?
Let me pass that to Ealan. I know he was there because they did a demo during the press day.
Yeah. I mean, they sounded incredible. I mean, for what it's worth, and it's worth a lot. They sounded
70,000, yeah.
But I think, didn't he say they even have HDMI? You could connect up to your TV. Yeah, so if you want an all-in-one solution with big old tower speakers next to your TV, if you have some modern-looking setup, I mean, if you've got the money to spend, it seemed like they were surely worth it because, again, I got a binaural demo of that. That's the bass response hit just by themselves. You do not need a subwoofer with them.
Nope. Yep.
And the vocals, the highs were snappy. Wow, they were truly impressive. Although, because the Diva Utopias came out last year. Mm-hmm. Now they have the Diva Mezza Utopias, which are larger. Mm-hmm. I didn't get a chance to ask the rep. I didn't get a chance to ask him if they were planning on maybe going smaller, like an oversized bookshelf version,
a Diva Petite Utopia.
Mm. Yeah,
Petite Utopia.
Because that would definitely interest me. Because I just don't prefer like big old towers like that, because the way my living room is set up, I just wouldn't have anywhere to put them.
Yeah, sure.
So that was my only question, but I didn't get to ask that question. But yeah, as far as where the trajectory that they're going with this Focal name partnership, it's really impressive what they're coming out with.
Yeah, and I think both will still be current on the line, the Diva Utopia and the Diva Mezza Utopia. The Diva Utopia is only $40,000 a pair, but they do have built-in name amplification. And I think he said, in addition to the larger cabinet, larger drivers from 6 to 8 inches in the mid bass, they also have larger amplifiers and more power. But it is meant as a plug it in and press play kind of solution, right? And there is a calibration thing you can do with your own ears. It plays these test tones and you say, I hear this over here, I hear this over there. And it can actually move the sweet spot depending on how you've placed the speakers in the room, which is kind of nice. If you have optimized placement of the speakers, it can compensate for that. It does have HDMI input, so you can plug in a TV, but it doesn't do multi-channel. There's no option for multi-channel. It's just it's a 2-channel solution, but no subwoofer option and no subwoofer needed. Great sounding system, but as you said, a lot of money.
A lot of money, but we're just going to keep going up in price for our best loudspeakers, best stereo loudspeakers. These go to the Bowers & Wilkins 801 Abbey Road limited edition. There's only going to be 140 pairs of these made in this special finish. These are, I believe, 70,000 a pair. That's just for the loudspeakers. So you do need to add on amplification and cables and preamps and streamers and all the other stuff. So you will be pushing, depending on what you want to match it with, you're probably going to be well over 100,000 for this system. But talk about this. Oh, and I do want to plug, we are going to have a special podcast just dedicated to these speakers with their director of product marketing, Andy Kerr. So look for that coming up soon after this is released. But Chris, you got to hear them. So talk to me about.
Ealan might have heard them as well, but I'll start. There aren't that many speaker companies that can say they were in the room when it happened. Right, they were in the room in Abbey Road when many of the signature album releases of the 70s, 80s, 90s were recorded. And so when they talked about this history that they've had with Abbey Road Studios and the partnership that they've had since I think it was probably the 70s or 80s when they first got the Bowers & Wilkins speakers in there, but you could fact check me later. They talked about the relationship. They talked about the initial reaction of the engineers who said, okay, you know what, those speakers are interesting, but we think they sound a little colored. And so the speaker designers were like, whoa, what do you mean? And so they actually went back to the original recordings. These are recordings that were made before the Bowers & Wilkins were in the studio. And they found the flaws that they had been looking for in the recording itself. So the speakers just end up being so transparent and revealing that it was revealing stuff in their original recordings that they had made with lesser monitor speakers. So that's an interesting thing. And once they heard that, they're like, oh, we got to keep these ones because we don't want to do that again. So interspersed with the conversation from the Bowers & Wilkins guys, they played a bunch of recordings that were made using the Bowers & Wilkins speakers as a reference. So the first thing that came out was the Indiana Jones theme. And I'm like, dun, 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 dun. And I'm like, yeah, this is so cool. And they played it back on those same reference speakers. So we kind of felt like, hey, we could be in the studio right now listening to John Williams' creation for the first time. But it was not exactly the first time that song was played. But that was cool to have that system and that kind of bit of history. And yeah, there only are about a gross of them made. I don't know if the number's 140 or 144. I heard different numbers at the show, but they're not gross at all. They're beautiful, in fact. And yeah, for $70,000, you can bring home a very iconic looking and amazing sounding speaker. Again, if you got the money.
Yeah.
What'd you think, Ealan? You heard them too.
Yeah, I did hear them. I mean, yeah, it was kind of nice how they played Indiana Jones, and then I think during that demo they also did Sam Smith.
Yeah, they did
something more modern. But both ends of the spectrum, they played them so beautifully. I mean, it really sounded like as if I was in the control room at Abbey Road. You know, hearing Sam Smith while he was, recording said song. So yeah, if you to hear, if you want a definition of reference quality, that's exactly what Bowers & Wilkins was able to achieve with these.
Yeah.
And just to clarify, there's a lot of somewhat confusion to their naming. So there's also the 801 D4 Signature Edition model, which is the exact same version of this in a different finish. And so if you're looking for this particular model in, I think it's California Burl or Midnight Blue are the two finishes that they offer in their regular, well, not say regular, but regular signature range. You can get those finishes, and those will, I think they come in 10,000 less. I think the limited edition one
bargain
is so
you can afford a pair of cables.
There is,
and maybe even some nice pucks for the bottom, some nice IsoAcoustics feet.
Right, but then there's also a 801 D4 regular version, not the signature edition, which does have slightly different internal components, things to that nature, which is a little bit less, but it's not an exact copy of the signature and the limited edition.
I don't know. If I had the money, I'd want to go right to that Abbey
You're
room.
just going at the top.
Yep. I want the pair that was, it's inspired by the mixing studio inside the studio. It's got the color of some of the mixing board on it. That to me is like the holy grail of the 801 D4 speakers.
Right. Well, now we're going to take things over to the home theater category. I know that's the one that everyone's most excited about. And we're going to
Ealan.
especially Ealan, but let's start off. I'm going to try to go from least expensive to most expensive in this category. And the SVS Ultra Evolution system always seems to come in as best and least expensive option in this category. What did they do this time at Audio Advice? Ealan,
why don't you?
They actually had one of their smallest systems that they showcased. Again, because it was literally a hotel room. It was on the 14th floor, I think. Mm-hmm. And yeah, they had their bookshelves. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was just three bookshelves in the front and then two in the rear. And then one of their new, I think it was the SB5000 subwoofer.
Yeah, that was one of the most expensive components in their system.
Yeah,
like it alone was like $2,000, I think.
And
plus the elevation speakers, they had a couple of elevation speakers.
Oh yes, two elevation speakers as well.
Yeah.
Again, the more expensive elevation speakers, not their prime elevation, but their the
Ultra Evolution.
Yeah,
Ultra Evolution elevation.
Yes,
it's a mouthful. Yeah,
and I mean, for spending a few $1,000s and having a system sound that good, I mean, once again, SVS really knows, especially with this Ultra Evolution series that they came out with, I think last year or 2 years ago. I mean, they're finding ways, they're continuing to find ways to maximize performance with how many dollars you spend. And yeah, this particular demo room was no exception. And yeah, totally impressed. SVS once again knocked it out of the park with ways to not have to, break the bank and yet still having it sound incredible.
Yeah, and I think like the KEF system, they could have used a less expensive subwoofer, but they didn't want to. This is one of the new ones that they're highlighting, and it can pressurize a room, particularly a small room. I think it's a 15-inch driver. It's not their biggest. They have a 17, but it's that kind of system. I think in a small room, particularly, would sound amazing with a smaller subwoofer, or even a pair of smaller subwoofers, even for less than the $2,000 of the single sub. But there are, vendors always want to show their newest stuff and their hottest stuff and their coolest stuff. So they're not going to highlight a 2 or 3 year old model, right? But as an actual consumer, I think you'd get much, very great results with something that might be a little bit more affordable on the sub side, particularly when you're matching it with the nano bookshelves and the bookshelves and the elevation speakers in a smaller system like that.
Right.
All right. Well, let's jump to our next winner, Best Home Theater System. This is a complete system under $25,000 with video, and this goes to Epson, Polk, and Denon for this system. And I think Epson has a new projector that came out, which probably helped them win this one. Ealan, did you see this one?
Yeah, this one was very impressive. Again, picture and sound. Especially with this particular price point. I mean, projectors just seem to be getting so much better, especially when they're trying to target consumers that don't want to spend as much. Because I think the model that they had is $4,000.
Yeah, $39.99.
Yeah.
Yep.
So basically $1,000 per K that you would get, and the brights, there wasn't all that many things to complain about. We watched Furiosa, the bullet farm scene, and man, that particular scene alone just has so much sonically going on, but also just the colors and the saturation and deep blacks. And, when that scene first starts, when she shoots the flare up and that bright green smoke billows. I mean, yeah, it was, again, obviously it's not cheap, but in the grand scheme of things, it's actually not that expensive compared to what you can spend when you're dealing with, top tier high end stuff.
For sure.
So to have these Polk reserve, I think it was a 7.4.4 system.
No, it didn't have any height channels. Apparently they were trying to put height channels in, and they had the brackets up there, but they couldn't find a good way to run the wiring. So by the time the show actually went live, it was just 7x4. It didn't actually have height channels installed, but it still sounded great, I have to say.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's the size of the room was still a bit big for those speakers, I thought, in the end. But at the same time, not having to spend, $50, $60, $100,000 to achieve what they achieved was pretty remarkable.
Yeah, and I think that Epson projector is pretty special. I mean, Epson has always been known for being bright in both white brightness and color brightness. They've gotten some flack in the past about how they refer to their 4K projectors and which ones are really 4K and which ones aren't. This one's really 4K. It doesn't mean it has a native 4K chip. It does the same thing that all the DLP projectors do, except the super expensive ones. It takes a 1080p chip and it shifts the axis to do a pixel shift 3 times to get a 4K image. So if you look on screen with your human eyes and you see a 4K test pattern, you will see every single pixel of that 4K test pattern. Persistence of vision that humans have when they look at stuff doesn't allow you to see each individual pixel as being separate. It all basically blends together in one giant 4K image. Many of Epson's more affordable projectors don't do that. They just do a single pixel shift, and that gives you half of 4K resolution, but twice 1080p. Still looks great. Resolution, it turns out, is one of the least important things for us to judge picture quality. Contrast and color, much higher, much more important. But when you're a hobbyist and you're buying a projector, you like to know that you're getting the latest and greatest. You like to know you're getting true 4K resolution. So on this projector, you're getting 4K resolution. It's a 3-chip LCD imaging engine with a laser and phosphor light source. So you don't have any rainbow effect that you can get on the DLP projectors, particularly the more affordable ones. And it's got so many features like lens shift and custom lens memory, a motorized zoom lens. So it's so much easier to set up. So I think to reach that price point with this feature set, even if it doesn't have the best contrast, which it doesn't match the Sony and the JVC or even some of the more expensive Epsons. But it can look okay in a bright room because it is 2200 lumens, which isn't bad. And when you get it into a dark theater, it does a really nice job. I think the fact that it's got that little extra bit of brightness allows you to see specular highlights very well. And so, is it the best projector at the show? Of course not. There was a $30,000 JVC projector, which we'll probably get to. But
we will get to, yeah. Yep.
It's hard to beat that new Epson, the LS 9000.
No, let's definitely acknowledge the video category. Best budget projector. That was going to come up later, but I think Chris just covered it now that the Epson LS 9000 best budget projector at Audio Advice Live. And I must say, let's just jump into the next projector because we have 2 projectors on our list. And the best, I think, overall projector is what you described it as, the JVC DLA NZ9000. Top of the line JVC. You're spending a boatload of money.
NZ9000 or NZ900?
NZ900. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I thought I might have gotten it wrong.
Okay, no, I can't read my own writing. So. Yeah, NZ900 JVC. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, and until you get into the triple DLP actual 4K native projectors, which are up in the $70,000 range, there is a sweet spot of about $20,000 to $35,000 of projectors from, I'd say, mostly Sony and JVC. Epson has some in that category as well, but the Sony and the JVC are better known for their outstanding blacks. It's kind of like an OLED on a screen, sort of. Not exactly. I mean, you can't project black, so the black levels of projector are never quite going to match a flat panel. But when you're in a dark home theater environment, these home theater projectors with native 4K resolution in liquid crystal on steroids, liquid crystal on silicone. I always call it liquid crystal on steroids. These LCOS imaging engines, which are named it's SXRD for JVC, no, for Sony, SXRD for Sony, and DILA, DILA, Digital Imaging Light Amplification. I don't know how I remember these things, and I probably got some of them wrong. But JVC and Sony both make these great 3-chip 4K native projectors that look amazing in dark home theater rooms. And the NZ900 was in 2 or 3 of the rooms at the show. And it was almost like looking at a flat panel. It was that good. Really excellent contrast. Color saturation was rich and deep. These have all the features you need with the lens memory and anamorphic lens support. So I think it's hard to do any better than the JVC NZ900 for a $30,000 projector. So if you've got the budget, you're in for a treat.
Yeah, and we have them as a win in the best system under 200,000. The best home theater that was matched with MartinLogan speakers, Trinnov processing, and amplification. Who wants to talk about a $200,000 home theater room? Ealan?
Yeah, I mean, it's that one, to me, I don't know. That one didn't stand out as like this, oh my gosh, I have to have this immediately if I had that kind of money. But I will say that because all of the speakers are electrostats, I mean, they sounded so clear, so neutral. They played Encanto as one of the demos.
Mm-hmm.
And, obviously you're going to see a lot of home theater demos, but I did enjoy the fact that they also played some music because, I mean, that's really where electrostats shine. And yeah, that was a really cool demo to be able to hear not only just music in stereo, but surround sound music in a movie.
Yeah.
And I was, again, it wasn't my favorite, but man, it definitely, for those who like that electrostat sound and having that pristine imaging, I mean, yeah, you're definitely gonna go for that. I wish, because to me, like, I don't know, electrostats just kind of take up a lot of space. I know they have smaller versions of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
but yeah, it was definitely impressive, and I liked the fact that they played Ready Player One, the racing scene, because that's one of my go-to demos because it has it all, the lows and the highs and everything in between. So that I actually didn't see that demo played in many other rooms, which was kind of surprising to me. So
I think I saw it in a few. And I recently got back into that movie because I saw it once when it first came out. And I'm like, good movie. But then, I don't know, I caught it, I think, at one of the demos. And I'm like, that really was a good movie. So I ended up buying the 4K Blu-ray disc. And I still don't think I have a good digital copy of it, but I do have the 4K Blu-ray. So that's good. I hear what you're saying about, the electrostats having a very specific sound. I have MartinLogans at home in my main system. They're older Arius. They've probably lost a little bit on the high end by now, but probably my ears have as well. So it's perfect. But the nice thing about MartinLogans, actually, small aside, when we were in the demo, there was a guy who kind of interrupted the presenter, like I like to do. I like to interrupt everybody all the time. And he said, I would never have these speakers in my back. And the guy's like, oh, okay. Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't want to be mean, but I would never have them as my rear channel speakers. And he said, well, why do you say that? He said, because they're too gosh darn big. And that's what he meant. It wasn't that he didn't like the sound. It was that putting a full range, full size, a hybrid electrostatic speaker in the back of your room is something that only people, certain people have enough room for. But the presenter did make a very good point. I think it was Corey from MartinLogan who said, you don't have to put electrostats everywhere. Concentrate on the front with a nice pair of electrostats. If you have, and then maybe an electrostatic center channel speaker, so it's nice and coherent across the front soundstage. But if you're limited by budget or by space, use some of our other technologies like the folded motion tweeters that we have in the Motion series that have a very similar sonic characteristic to electrostats, but they're a lot smaller. They can go in wall, they can go on wall, they can go on ceiling. You could cut the cost of the system by an order of magnitude by focusing on the electrostats just in the front, and then using these motion drivers, motion tweeters in the speakers in the back, the sides, and the tops. And you could have a really amazing sounding system, very coherent, still has that sparkle that you hear in electrostatic speakers, but with a combination of both these folded ribbon motion tweeters. I think it's the AMT is the original patent that expired. So there's a lot of companies that are using these motion tweeters, including like Emotiva and MartinLogan and some other companies. Golden Ear, I think, uses them as well. So you can get great results without having to necessarily put in electrostat all around the room.
Yeah.
All right. Well, stepping up in price, if 200 is not your limit and 250, you could stretch it up to 250. Best home theater under 250, the Focal Utopia Cinema loudspeakers with name amplification. Chris, tell me about
I have to say
system.
That was one of the systems that sounded almost better from next door. Focal had this room that was split into two. It had the powered speakers on one side and the surround sound system on the other. And when we were just kind of wrapping up listening to those Diva Mezza Utopias, we heard the demo going on in the theater behind us. I'm like, oh my God, that sound is coming from everywhere. And it was like that was the kind of impression, is when they put on the clips, it came from everywhere. It was radiating from outside the boundaries of the room. So when you were in the actual demo itself, that was probably one of the most immersive demos I heard at the show, particularly on Dolby Atmos music. There's a cut, the Dolby Atmos remix of Elton John, Rocket Man. Oh my God, it just washes over the entire room. And it not in a cheesy way, but in a, wow, I'm inside the music right now. This is really cool kind of way. And then they also put on something that was very unique. It was a remix that Techno Dad, our friend Techno Dad, Chana D, did of a dance mix of a song. And he not only remixed the whole thing in Dolby Atmos, but he put the Dolby Atmos renderer up on the screen so you can see where all the objects are bouncing around the room. You can see exactly how it was envisioned by the mixer. And then you can kind of say, well, is it being matched by the sound that I'm listening to it on? And actually it was, when he had the sound that was floating up in the middle and from the top to the bottom of the screen, you could hear that in the imaging. When he had the sound spinning all around the room, you could hear that in the imaging. So it was a very effective way of showing how good their speakers are at creating this multi-channel 3-dimensional image. And I love the way they did it. And I'm happy to see Techno Dad getting some creds up there.
Yeah. How many speakers and subs are in this system and height?
7.4.4.
Okay.
So 4 subwoofers, 7 main speakers, and 4 height channels. 744.
Nice.
I didn't do that in order. 7 surround speakers, 4 subwoofers, and 4 height channels. There you go.
Wasn't this the debut of their new cinema line as well?
Yeah, I think so. And they're not cheap. They're like, are they like 12,000 a speaker for those LCRs? I think, Brian, you might have the reference. You might have that in front of me. Maybe you don't.
I don't have all the prices, but I think they all added up to just under 250,000 for the system and the amps and all that stuff that you need for.
But the funny thing is, their primary source for all this was $199 Apple TV. Because they were listening to Apple Music in Dolby Atmos, and they were listening to it back on the Apple TV. Okay, they had a Kaleidoscape as well. I think almost everybody did, which is great because Kaleidoscape can store, physical copies of the movies. You don't have to worry about hotel Wi-Fi when you're trying to stream stuff, and the quality is just as good as physical disc, really. So Kaleidoscape, as usual, dominated the show in the home theater demos. I think it was in every single room.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, there is another category for best bass. And I'm afraid to ask how many subwoofers were in this room.
13.
This is the Trinnov waveforming system with the Ascendo. I think that's how you say it.
Ascendo or Ascendo. Yeah.
Yeah. Speakers and subs. Who wants to take this one first?
Ealan?
Yeah. I mean, if you, once again, if you have the money to get that many subwoofers, I guess it's worth it because ever since waveforming came out, ever since I heard it for the first time at CEDIA last year, I mean, I wouldn't say nothing comes close, but nothing matches exactly
Right.
to just how absolutely tight the bass gets. Because, I mean, that's exactly what it does. It removes all those standing waves
Mhm.
because all the bass that gets pushed out in the front subwoofers immediately gets absorbed by the rear subwoofers. So
Exactly.
nothing bounces around.
Yeah.
And it just, but not only that, they had 6 subwoofers in the front, 6 in the rear to absorb. And then they
Mhm.
had this gigantic 32-inch Ascendo
Yep.
subwoofer to handle everything 20 hertz and below.
Yeah.
Um,
To pressurize
but
the room. Yeah.
to pressure, because, once it gets absorbed, it has nowhere to go. So that's what the other one was for, to actually bring all that real deep bass back into the room. So, man, like, again, like whenever I'm at a demo for a home theater system, and you can move the fabric on my shirt or my pants just sitting there, that means it's pressurized so well.
Right.
And yeah, that's exactly what I felt. And the most impressive bass demo was when they played, or at least to me, was when they played 13 Hours, that
Oh, right.
military
Yeah. Yeah.
military movie. When they played that scene with them shooting all the people trying to attack them at the
Mhm.
whatever base, just the weight and the bass hits that were behind every gunshot,
Mhm.
behind every explosion, just just so tight. It's like that's probably what it would sound like if you were actually in a firefight like that.
Fortunately, I have
Um,
not been.
yeah, me neither.
Yeah.
But
Good.
like it's like just to have just to know that you're getting those bass hits. You get the wavelength hitting your ears and then just dissipating immediately.
Right. Right.
Like it's amazing. It is incredible, but at the same time, like,
13
man, you got to spend a
subwoofers.
lot of money. I mean,
Yeah.
who in their right mind is able to get a total of 12 subwoofers in their system?
13.
But I think the minimum to make it
Yeah.
work is 4. So
Yes.
you can have 2 in the front and then
Yes.
2 in the rear that are absorbing it.
Mhm.
So that's something.
Yeah.
If you really want to take advantage of waveforming in your own little theater at home and not spend hundreds of thousands of dollars. But yeah, obviously they didn't hold back and they had the most amazing system. Although they did play a clip from Spider-Man Far From Home
Mhm.
when Mysterio is talking to Peter, through the heights basically, and it's all moving around the
Ah.
soundstage. That
Yeah. I
was
don't think I
definitely
heard
the
that
most
one.
impressive,
That was the most
like
impressive?
surround,
Yeah. Okay.
like to have the whole entire soundstage just be lit up like that.
Mm.
That was the most impressive demo I heard as far as immersion is concerned.
Yeah.
So yeah, they did it both. They wowed me with immersiveness and they wowed me with bass response with that waveforming technology. So
Yeah, I'd love to hear. I think the lowest I've ever heard was maybe with 8 subwoofers, so 4 in the front, 4 in the back. But they can theoretically do it with a total of 4, 2 in the front, 2 in the back.
yeah,
I don't know. Eventually, maybe once Trinnov has got like all of the kinks worked out, which they probably have by now, maybe they'll license the technology to other vendors who could then
mm-hmm.
put out an AV receiver that might have waveforming. I mean, they haven't announced any plans to do that, so this is just me speculating at this point. But to
Yeah,
get into waveforming right now, where you get that like plus or minus 1 dB of bass, like everywhere in the room. I mean, that's unheard of in home theater, installations. If you could get something like that without having to spend 16 grand on a Trinnov processor and another, I don't know, $40,000 to $50,000 on a whole crap ton of subwoofers, that would be great. I mean, there's some really good room correction software out there right now, like Dirac and even Odyssey, built into a lot of receivers. But waveforming is a little bit different, and it does specifically focus on how do you get tame, uniform, and even and dynamic bass response throughout an entire room. Now, does somebody care as much about this in the living room? No, probably not. I mean, you could probably get good results with a couple of subwoofers and some experimentation and some good room correction software. But when you're putting in these big home theaters and you don't want the person in the back row to hear something completely different from what the guy's hearing in the middle or the front row, you want everybody to have a uniform response, then this kind of system is great. It's great for that. And again, right now, it's just if you have to ask how much it costs, you probably can't afford it. Sorry.
Yeah.
I can't afford it. Sorry.
All right. Well, we're going to jump back into the video category. This is another one that's not an obvious choice until you see it hooked up, I think. That's the MadVR NV Core. What are they doing that your regular TV or projector can't already do?
They're processing.
Yeah.
The biggest thing that they do in this entry level processor, which entry level is still $5,800, is HDR tone mapping. That's something that it's hard for a lot of projector and display makers to get really right. So what they do is they actually they allow you to put in your TV model number or even the exact peak luminance of your display, whether it's a projector on a screen or a flat panel. And if that's, say, like 350 nits, which, on a projector is actually really respectable, then they'll take the incoming HDR signal, which might have been mastered for 4,000 nits, and they will map it so that it fits the available luminance of your projector or TV. What that means is that when there's a dark scene, you can still see the shadow details. And when there's a sunset or, there's areas of specular highlights up in the clouds, you can still see those as well. So HDR tone mapping is something that can make or break a display. But if you have this projector that can do it, this processor that can do it for you, then it can take a good display and turn it into an amazing display. It's not the only thing they do. They do some clever features with subtitles where they can move it out of the letterbox area and into the screen in case you've zoomed in your letterbox image to fit a 2.4 to 1 screen, right? You got some letterboxed CinemaScope content and you want it to fill up a CinemaScope screen. The MadVR can strip the subtitle out of the black area at the bottom, which is now no longer visible since you zoomed that away, and it can put it at the bottom of the picture. So that's a very cool feature I've never seen any other processor do. You can do it on a Kaleidoscape, but only for the content that's on the Kaleidoscape. In this case, it can work with a streamer or a Blu-ray player or anything and just put the subtitles where they need to be. So that's kind of a cool feature.
Ealan, did you get to check out the MadVR?
Yeah, I actually got to have a demonstration by Richard Latovsky, the CEO.
Yeah, the CEO.
And man, because it kind of piggybacking off of the subtitle thing, not only can it shift it upwards so you can actually see it, but it's they now have dynamic coloring,
right,
so that whatever happens to be on the screen, it will shift the colors of the subtitles itself to kind of blend in a little bit more to the picture, so it's not so just like,
but also still be readable.
White.
Right.
Yeah, but also still be readable, because they also have this little background, this kind of transparent background behind the subtitles as well. And you can change the size of the subtitles. So they've got so many different little things that really help those who watch everything with subtitles, like myself. Even though I can hear pretty well, my wife has some pretty bad tinnitus. So we're always watching stuff with subtitles. But it's also kind of just the norm nowadays.
Sure.
People just watch subtitles even though they can probably hear just fine. So it's kind of capitalizing on that fact that, 80-90% of the people watch everything with subtitles nowadays. So it's just making it that much better. But I was really impressed with the HDR tone mapping as well. Like, they showed this And this was on a Sony Bravia 9 television, something that can handle HDR tone mapping on its own very well. And
Right.
yet, they had this particular scene that they're shown with like snow on the ground and horses. And he showed it to me without HDR tone mapping on, just what the TV would do on its own. And then he switched over to the MadVR version. And all of a sudden, you could see so many more details in the snow, like all these little blades of grass coming out that were nowhere to be seen previously. So it was really impressive. And one other thing I want to hit on is, I don't know, it's kind of controversial because a lot of people don't like motion smoothing on TVs anyway, because it gives it that soap opera look. But they do have AI, like
motion AI.
Yeah, motion AI, which now, but you can also set it to different strengths. Right. So it doesn't have to be like on or off. You can actually set it to a little bit, medium, a lot, insane, I think is one of the categories.
Oh, really? No ludicrous?
Yeah. Not on this one. No, maybe in a future firmware update. But it's like, he showed me just the very lowest setting, because we were watching Baby Driver. Oh yeah, and it's the very intro scene where he's moving around and just kind of going along the streets, and there's a lot of judder because of the 24p that it was filmed in, and man, because I've always been a fan of, like, I want it to look cinematic, so I don't care if it has that judder because that just looks cinematic to me. But when he switched it to the lowest setting, it just took it off enough to where it still looked cinematic, but it wasn't as jarring when you're having panning shots. And I was like, well, I think I'm convinced now because, now that you mention it, it is a bit jarring. So to have it shaved off just a little bit, I think I kind of like it. So it's pretty impressive what they're coming out with.
Yeah, the only drawback, the motion AI is not on the core; it's only on the NVH. Correct. Yeah, so that's the $16,000 or $17,000 processor, and the colored colored subtitles feature that you were talking about, where it looks ahead to the screen to see what colors are going to be in use and then optimizes the subtitle. That's part of an upgrade option for the NV core, which costs an additional like $12.95. So the base level still has a lot of cool features. It does some, speaking of controversial, it also can do some aspect ratio games that can like make, let's say, a football game that's 16:9 still look amazing on a CinemaScope screen. And they're really looking at that image very closely to make sure that they're not cutting off any essential information and they're not stretching or squeezing the image too much to make it look unnatural. So that's something that I'm sure a lot of purists are like, nope, don't want it. I only want the original aspect ratio. And in which case, just don't use that feature. That's fine. I mean, I probably wouldn't use that feature. Or instead of setting it to an auto mode, which might do a little bit too much stretch, set it to a manual mode where you can like, all right, let me zoom in this much of the image and stretch out a tiny bit at the edges and still have a little bit of black bars, but still use more of the screen. It gives you those options, which is kind of cool. In a video processor, it's all about choices, right? So it gives you some choices.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, we do have one more winner in our home theater category, and that's because you do have to sit somewhere when you watch the stuff.
How could we forget? Yeah.
This goes to the Audio Advice Revelation Luxury Home Theater Chair. Yep. I mean, this, you guys got to sit in it and play around. Talk to me about
sleep in it for a while, maybe. Ealan, did you sit down and play around with it at all?
I actually didn't play around with it much, but I got a demonstration from Harrison. So
okay. Did you at least get the massage function and check out the lights and the full recline, everything? No?
No.
Well, what's cool about it is that it only is about 2.5 inches from the wall in order to do a full recline, because the seat just kind of moves forward. So it could make the difference between having 1 row of seating or 2 rows of seating in a smaller home theater, or 3 rows versus 2 rows. it just was so comfortable. It has all the features. It's got massive storage. It's got a USB port. Doesn't have a built-in fridge or toilet. Come on, what are they thinking? Maybe the next version. But I think the only one potential drawback, and this is common to almost every home theater seat that's out there, is that because it does have a bit of padding behind the head, for you to be comfortable, you may not get direct sound from like rear speakers, right? So how you install the speakers may be a little different because you know that you're going to have these seats, right? So you might want to end up putting your rear channel speakers a little bit higher, but not quite up to like the level of a height level. But so even when you're reclined and you got a little bit of chair behind you, you can still get the full effects of that surround sound channel. So something I hadn't really thought about. I saw a video by Andrew Robinson, our friend Andrew Robinson, and he was talking about that, and he was trying to convince everybody to just buy couches instead, and I wasn't buying it. After sitting in that Revelation luxury, I did not want to get up. Super comfortable and only like $1,350, which is crazy. So much cheaper than a lot of the other competitive chairs out there.
Oh yeah, by far.
Cool. Well, let's wrap this up. You guys toured this for, I think, 2 days, 3 days. You were there. Yeah. You saw all the demos. We just highlighted some of your favorites. What were some of your closing thoughts from the event? I'll let Chris go first.
I was impressed. I hadn't even really heard of Audio Advice Live before. I was aware of Audio Advice as a dealer, online dealer, and I'd seen they have some good editorial content as well. They review some of the stuff they sell, but I hadn't really had any direct experience and didn't realize just how big a show this is. I mean, we actually got the numbers from Sue, and I think it was over 1,700 attendees this year, which is great for a consumer show. To have that many people come in and put down, maybe it's not expensive, like $40 or $45 for the full weekend, but pay money just to listen to home theater systems. I mean, that's kind of novel, right? But they're happy to do it because when else do you get this kind of opportunity? You can't just walk in off the street at Audio Advice and say, "Show me your best $500,000 home theater system now, please, thank you." So here you can do that because it's already set up for it. And your dog's saying hi. She stayed quiet for the whole show. It was well done. But one thing that was different that you don't see at a lot of these 2-channel hi-fi shows is that they were drilling holes in the ceilings and the walls where they had to like put in this system. And the hotel let them do that. Or at least I think they let them do that. They got away with it, right? A lot of these shows don't. They don't put anything in the ceiling. So everything is just kind of on the outside. It's not very well, it's not finished. In this show, they one of the requirements for having it at this hotel was that they would let them drill holes in the ceiling panels to put in speakers. Maybe they said, "We're keeping the speakers now." I don't know. I don't know what the arrangement was, but I think that helped in putting together really nice sounding systems. So yeah, kudos to Scott Newnham, the CEO of Audio Advice, and the whole team that put this thing together. It couldn't have been easy. It looked like, and it came off, I think, without a hitch, at least from my perspective.
Ealan, closing thoughts?
Yeah. Again, it was my first time as well. And man, like I said at the beginning, it had such a cool vibe. Like I was just there with my buddies and they really made me feel like I was a part of their team and had been a part of their team for a long time. Really cool people all around. And also, just to hit on the fact that they not only had demo rooms, but they also had, throughout the weekend, they also had different meetings that you could attend that were talking about various topics. I didn't happen to catch, I only got to catch one of them. I wanted to catch more, but it just didn't pan out that way because I was busy with other demos. But I did catch one with Nick from Audio Advice and also one of the Trinnov reps. And they were just talking about basic like things you need to consider when building a dedicated home theater and where exactly you should put your front speakers, if you should maybe toe them in a little bit, where you should orient your surround speakers and your surround backs, where exactly you should try and keep your height speakers, maybe not too far forward or too far back.
Hmm.
And they had a question and answer thing at the end, which was great because you got to pick the brain of this rep from Trinnov who has done theater installs and who knows a lot about home theaters.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just demo rooms. It was really cool to have, experiences beyond that, and just to talk about home theater as well. So I was impressed. I hope to go next year, but we'll see.
No,
Yeah, me
that's
too.
great.
And I'd recommend that anybody who can make it, just check it out. It's worth it. I think a lot of consumers actually did fly in and drive in from different parts of the country to be able to be a part of it. And I think it was probably worthwhile.
Yeah, they've already announced next year's show. It's around the first week of August, so it will be back, and exciting show. If you're into home theater, you're into hi-fi, it sounds like it's definitely worth checking out in the Raleigh area. I want to thank our editor at large, Chris Boyland, video producer Ealan Osborne, for spending the time there demoing all these systems. Chris has a full write-up on the website of all of the winners that we talked about. That'll be linked below. Of course, we want your comments, feedback, anything in the comments below. And we appreciate you guys tuning in, and we'll look
Don't
forward
forget to like and subscribe.
Oh, subscribe. I forgot to. If you made it this far and you haven't liked or subscribed,
what are you waiting for?
Thank you for that. And yeah, we'll see everyone next time. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.